Hello students, your teacher here, Mr. Sarasinski, with another episode of Algebra 1. This is lesson 8.10 or 8.10, solving quadratic equations using the quadratic formula. And the quadratic formula is a really big formula. This is probably the biggest formula that you've seen so far in math up until this point. And so naturally, anytime you have a big formula that's difficult to remember, there's going to be a song that somebody makes or some special way to remember it. And I have included this song and dance, which hasn't always been a thing, it's new, in the lesson for today for you guys to watch and hopefully get a good laugh out of, but also remember that it is very effective at helping you memorize the formula. So today's lesson, remember, solving quadratics. So far you have two other ways. Factoring is the first way when you can factor the quadratic, meaning that factors of C add up to equal B, and that works. If it doesn't, you can always try solving by taking the square root, which is what we completed earlier today, and now the final method using the quadratic formula. So let's get started. The quadratic formula is another method to use to solve a quadratic equation. Solve the equation below using the quadratic formula. Make sure the equation is set equal to 0 and written in standard form. Remember, standard form for a quadratic is ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Identify a, b, and c. So in this equation, A is 1, B is -5, and C is -36. Substitute these values into the formula and simplify. So the formula is over here on the left, x equals -b, so -5, plus or minus the square root of b squared, so that's -5 squared, minus 4ac, all over 2a. All right, so first thing is -5. This is going to become +5. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and change that. And I'm going to start to simplify everything inside the radical first. So we have x equals 5 plus or minus the square root. -5 squared is 25. Minus, let's see, 4 times 1 is 4. 4 times -36 is positive. -4 times -36 is positive 144. All over 2, because 2 times 1 is 2. And then x equals 5 plus or minus the square root of 169 over 2, which equals 5 plus or minus 13 over 2, which equals 5 plus 13 is 18 divided by 2, that is 9. And 5 minus 13 is -8 divided by 2, which is -4. So the solutions are -4, 9. And remember that these solutions that we're finding are the x-intercepts of the graph of this original function. Okay, so all we're doing is identifying where this equation, the graph of this equation, crosses the x-axis. And so it crosses at x equals -4 and x equals 9. All right, moving on. Number 1, solve each equation using the quadratic formula. So first thing is to identify a, b, and c. A is 1, b is -8, and c is, this is not in standard form. Actually, skip the first step. We need to subtract 20 from both sides. So x squared minus 8x minus 20 equals 0. Once you have it set equal to 0, then you are able to start plugging in values. All right, c equals -20. So let's go ahead and set it up. X equals -b, so that's going to be +8. I'm going to go ahead and change those too as I plug in today. That's going to be +8. plus or minus the square root of b squared, negative 8 squared, minus 4 times 1 times negative 20, all over 2 times 1. So let's go ahead and start to simplify the values inside the radical. X equals 8 plus or minus the square root of 64 minus, actually plus 80, all over 2. X equals 8 plus or minus the square root of 144 over 2. That would be 8 plus or minus 12 over 2. 8 plus 12 is 20 divided by 2, which is 10. 8 minus 12 is negative 4 divided by 2, which is negative 2. So the solutions to this quadratic equation where the graph crosses the x-axis are negative 2 and 10. Number 2, we've got to move 12 to the other side to get it in standard form. All right, now let's go ahead and identify A, B, and C. A is 2, B is 7, C is negative 9. So x equals negative b, so negative 7, plus or minus the square root of 7 squared minus 4 times 2 times negative 9. All over 2 times 2. So we'll go ahead and simplify under the radical. That's negative 7 plus or minus the square root of 49. Negative 4 times 2 is negative 8. Negative 8 times negative 9 is positive 72 over 4. Okay, we're going to simplify the radical a little bit more. That's negative 7 plus or minus 72 plus 49, that's 110, 121, the square root of 121 over 4. That is negative 7 plus or minus 11 over 4. Negative 7 plus 11 is 4, divided by 4 is 1. And negative 7 minus 11 is negative 18 divided by 4. And negative 18 divided by 4 is going to be negative 9 halves. So the solutions to this equation are negative 9 halves and 1. Number 3. Number 3 is already in standard form, but it's a little bit different because one of the terms are missing. The b term is missing. So b is going to be 0, a is 3, c is negative 12. And we'll go ahead and set up our equation. X equals 0 plus or minus the square root of 0 squared minus 4 times 3 times negative 12 all over 2 times 3. And we'll go ahead and start off by simplifying the numbers under the radical. 0 squared is 0. Negative 4 times 3 is negative 12. And negative 12 times negative 12 is positive 144 all over 6. X equals 0 plus or minus the square root of 144 over 6, which is 0 plus or minus 12 over 6, which is, let's see, 0 plus 12 is 12 divided by 6, which is 2. And 0 minus 12 is negative 12 divided by 6, which is negative 2. So the solutions to this quadratic equation using the quadratic formula are negative 2 and 2. That is where that graph crosses the x-axis. Number 4, we need to move 6x to the other side. We get x squared plus 9x equals 0. And this we do not have a c, so a equals 1, b equals 9, c equals 0. But we can still use the quadratic formula. So let's go ahead and set it up. X equals -9 plus or minus the square root of 9 squared minus 4 times a times 0 all over 2 times 1. Go ahead and start simplifying inside the radical. 9 squared is 81 minus 0 over 2. X equals -9 plus or minus the square root of 81 over 2. That's -9 plus or minus 9 over 2. Well, let's see, -9 plus 9 is 0. Divided by 2, well, it's still just gonna be 0. And then -9 minus 9 is -18 divided by 2. And -18 divided by 2 is -9. So my solutions are -9 and 0. Okay. Moving on. Number 5 is already in standard form. A is -1, B is -10, C is -21. Lots of negatives here. X equals -b, so this is going to change to +10, plus or minus the square root of -10 squared minus 4 times -1 times -21. All over 2 times -1. So x equals 10 plus or minus, we're simplifying inside the radical now, the square root of 100 minus, let's see, -4 times -1 is +4. +4 times -21 is -81. I'm sorry, -84 divided by -2. So x equals 10 plus or minus the square root of 16 divided by -2. That is 10 plus or minus 4 divided by 2. 10 plus 4 is 14, and 14 divided by 2 is 7. And 10 minus 4 is 6, and 6 divided by 2 is 3. So the solutions to this equation, oh, hold up a minute. I forgot we're dividing by -2, so this is going to be -3 and -7. Oops, almost made a goof, caught myself. All right, number 6. Subtract 12x. We need to get everything on one side, and 4x squared minus 3x equals 0. There is no c, but that's okay. A equals 4, B equals -3, and C equals 0. All right, so let's go ahead and start setting this up. X equals -b, so this is going to become +3, plus or minus the square root of -3 squared minus 4 times 4 times 0, all over 2 times 4. So x equals, we're going to start simplifying inside the radical. -3 squared is +9 minus 0 over 8. That is x equals 3 plus or minus the square root of 9 divided by 8, which is 3 plus or minus 3 over 8. 3 plus 3 is 6. 6 divided by 8 is a fraction that simplifies to 3/4. And 3 minus 3 is 0, and 0 divided by 8 is 0. So we have 0 and 3/4 as the two solutions, and this is where that equation, the graph of that equation, crosses the x-axis. All right, moving on. Number 7. We have to subtract x and add 10. Subtract x and add 10. Okay, those cancel out. We got x squared minus 6x plus 10 equals 0. So now we can say A is 1, B is -6, C is 10. And we can start to set up our formula. So this will be negative b, so this is going to be +6 plus or minus the square root of -6 squared minus 4 times 1 times 10, all over 2 times 1. Let's start to simplify inside the radical. That's going to be 36 minus 40 all over 2. X equals 6 plus or minus the square root of -4 all over 2. And hopefully you remember when we were simplifying radicals earlier that if you have a negative inside the radical, there is not a solution, okay? No negatives can exist inside the radical. Therefore, the graph of this equation does not cross the x-axis. All because of this guy right here. Okay, number 8. Subtract 4 and add 3x squared to both sides. So we're going to get 6x squared minus 5x minus 4 equals 0. A is 6, B is -5, and C is -4. X equals -b, so this is going to become a +5, plus or minus the square root of -5 squared minus 4 times 6 times -4, all over 2 times 6. So let's go ahead and start simplifying inside the radical. That's 5 plus or minus the square root of 25. -4 times 6 is -24. -24 times -4 is +96. All over 12. So this is x equals 5 plus or minus 25 plus 96 is 121. Square root of 121 over 12. That's 5 plus or minus 11 over 12. And 5 plus 11 is 16 divided by 12, which is 4/3. And 5 minus 11 is -6. And -6 divided by 12 is -1/2. The solutions to this equation, where the graph of this equation crosses the x-axis, is x equals -1/2 and x equals 4/3. All right, number 9. And moving forward, these are irrational solutions, meaning they will have a radical in the solution. Okay. Number 9 is already in standard form. A is 1, B is 4, C is 1. So we can go ahead and set up our equation. This is going to be -b, so it's going to be -4 plus or minus the square root of 4 squared minus 4 times 1 times 1, all over 2 times 1. And we can go ahead and start simplifying in the radical. 4 squared is 16 minus 4 all over 2. X equals -4. Continue to simplify the radical. This is going to be the square root of 12 over 2. And really quick, I'm going to break up the square root of 12 by simplifying the radical. We need a perfect square factor. Perfect square factors are 1, 4, 9, 16, 25, 36. Okay, so what is a perfect square factor of 12? 4. So this could be like the square root of 4 times 3. And we can take the square root of 4, so that will become -4 plus or minus 2 times the square root of 3 over 2. And this simplifies. -4 divided by 2 is -2. And that cancels those out. Plus or minus 2 times the square root of 3. And this is our solution. So it's negative 2 plus 2 times the square root of 3 and negative 2 minus 2 times the square root of 3. But we don't need to simplify it any further. This is enough. Number 10, a equals negative 1, b equals negative 2, and c equals 7. So x equals positive 2 plus or minus the square root of negative 2 squared minus 4 times negative 1 times 7 all over 2 times negative 1. This is x equals 2 plus or minus the square root of 4. See, negative 4 times negative 1 is positive 4. Positive 4 times 7 is 28 over negative 2. That is x equals 2 plus or minus the square root of 32 over negative 2. And I need a perfect square factor of 32. And the perfect square factor of 32 is 16. That's the largest. And so we can take the square root of 16. The square root of 16 is 4. And we just leave 2 inside the radical divided by 2. Well, 2 divided by 2, these just cancel out, and so all we're left with is plus or minus 4 times the square root of 2. And that is our solution. I'm sorry, no, this simplifies even more. I did miss simplifying this part of the radical. So 2 and 2 cancel each other out. But since 4 is also divisible by 2, we can simplify that beginning part of the radical. If simplifying radicals is tripping you up in this part of the lesson, I challenge you to go and find a couple extra problems. Just Google it, go to Khan Academy, and work through a couple of those just so you get the gist of it. Number 11, not in standard form. We have to subtract 20 from both sides, so x squared plus x minus 11 equals 0, where a is 1, b is 1, and c is negative 11. And I think for time purposes, I'm going to do this one and the next one, and that's going to be it. So we can set up our formula. X equals negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 1 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 11, all over 2 times 1. X equals negative 1 plus or minus, let's simplify in the radical. 1 squared is 1. Minus 4 times 1 is negative 4. Negative 4 times negative 11 is positive 44, all over 2. That is x equals negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 45 over 2. And 45 will simplify into the square root of 9 times 5. And we can take the square root of 9. The square root of 9 is 3. So x equals negative 1 plus or minus 3 times the square root of 5 over 2. And actually, this one, because 2 does not go into negative 1 or 3, does not simplify. This is our answer. So it equals negative 1 plus 3 times the square root of 5 divided by 2, and negative 1 minus 3 times the square root of 5 divided by 2, meaning there are 2 roots. They are just irrational, yucky numbers. All right, add 2 to both sides. 4x squared minus 7x plus 2 equals 0. A equals 4, B equals negative 7, C equals 2. Set up the formula. X equals positive 7. We're changing the sign because of the formula. Plus or minus the square root of negative 7 squared minus 4 times 2, all over 2 times 4. Let's simplify in the radical. x equals 7 plus or minus the square root of 49 minus 32 all over 8. That is x equals 7 plus or minus the square root of 17 over 8. And the square root of 17 is not something I can simplify because it's a prime number. There are no perfect squares that are factors of 17. Therefore, this is the answer. I am your teacher. This is the way.